Imagine every major government on Earth collapsing at the same time. Not one country, not one region. Every single superpower on the planet simultaneously within the same 50-year window. The United States gone. China gone. Russia gone. The European Union gone. Every major economy, every military, every trade network, all of it, unraveling at once. Cities abandoned, supply chains broken, writing systems forgotten. Entire ways of life erased so completely that centuries later, people would dig up the ruins and have no idea who built them. You would call that the end of the world. And yet, this exact thing happened. Not in a movie, not in a prophecy, in real history. Around 1200 BCE, every major civilization on Earth collapsed. At the same time, within the same 50 years. And we still don't fully understand why. This is the Bronze Age collapse, and it is the single greatest mystery in the history of human civilization. To understand how catastrophic this was, you first need to understand what the world looked like before it happened. By 1200 BCE, humanity had been building complex civilizations for nearly 2,000 years. And the world they had created was extraordinary. Egypt was at the height of its power, the most recognizable civilization in history. Ruled by pharaohs, builders of monuments that still stand today. Their empire stretched from modern Sudan to modern Syria. They were untouchable. The Hittites controlled most of what is now Turkey and the Middle East. They were the only civilization powerful enough to fight Egypt to a standstill. And they did, at the Battle of Kadesh, one of the largest chariot battles in history. The Hittites were the second superpower of the ancient world. Mycenaean Greece, the civilization behind the legends of Troy, Achilles, and Odysseus, was thriving. Their palace cities were sophisticated. Their trade network was vast, their culture producing stories that we still tell today. The Minoans on the island of Crete had built one of the most advanced civilizations in the Mediterranean. Indoor plumbing, multi-story buildings, stunning art. Ugarit on the coast of modern Syria was one of the greatest trading cities in the world. Ships from Egypt, Greece, Cyprus, and the Hittite Empire all passed through its harbors. It was the New York City of the ancient world. And all of these civilizations were connected. They traded with each other, wrote letters to each other, knew each other's kings by name. It was a globalized ancient world, sophisticated, interconnected, and seemingly unshakable. And then, within 50 years, almost all of it was gone. It began around 1200 BCE, and it happened fast. The first signs were the cities. One by one, across the entire eastern Mediterranean, cities that had stood for centuries began to burn. Ugarit, that great trading capital, was destroyed so suddenly that archaeologists found a half-baked loaf of bread still in the oven when they excavated it 3,000 years later. Whoever attacked didn't give them time to finish breakfast. Letters found in the ruins of Ugarit paint a picture of desperate confusion. One letter, written by the king of Ugarit to the king of Cyprus just before the city's destruction, reads, "The enemy ships are here. They are attacking. The city is on fire. Send help immediately." No reply ever came. Mycenaean Greece collapsed almost simultaneously. Palace after palace burned. Mycenae. Tiryns. Pylos. The palace at Pylos showed evidence of desperate last-minute preparations. Weapons being distributed. Lookouts posted on the coast. It wasn't enough. The palace burned and was never rebuilt. The Hittite Empire, the second superpower that had fought Egypt to a draw, simply ceased to exist. Their capital city, Hattusa, was abandoned and burned. The Hittite king vanished from the historical record, an entire empire of millions of people gone. Even Egypt, mighty, ancient, seemingly eternal Egypt, was devastated. They survived, barely. But the Egypt that emerged from this period was a shadow of what it had been. The empire was gone. The power was broken. It would never fully recover. Within 50 years, the Bronze Age world was over. The population of the Eastern Mediterranean dropped by an estimated 50%. Cities that had existed for centuries became ghost towns. Trade networks that had connected the ancient world collapsed entirely. And perhaps most haunting of all, writing itself disappeared in many regions. The knowledge, the records, the stories, gone. Centuries of darkness followed. So complete that historians literally call it the Greek Dark Ages. So who was responsible? For a long time, historians pointed to one culprit: the Sea Peoples. Ancient Egyptian records describe terrifying raiders arriving by sea, warriors from unknown lands, attacking in massive, coordinated fleets, destroying everything in their path. The Egyptians called them the Sea Peoples. They are depicted in stunning detail on the walls of Egyptian temples, warriors in strange feathered helmets, fighting from ships, bringing entire civilizations to their knees. For decades, this seemed like the answer. The Sea Peoples swept through the Mediterranean, destroyed everything, and caused the collapse. But there's a problem. The more archaeologists dug, the more complicated the story became. Because the destruction wasn't uniform. Different cities were destroyed in different ways, at different times. Some showed signs of violent attack, others showed signs of earthquake damage, others showed signs of gradual abandonment, no violence at all, just people slowly leaving. And the Sea Peoples themselves, who were they? Where did they come from? Nobody knows. Some researchers think they weren't invaders at all, but refugees. Survivors of collapsing civilizations fleeing destruction, arriving on Egypt's shores in desperate waves. Not the cause of collapse, the result of it. So if it wasn't just the Sea Peoples, what happened? The modern consensus among historians is both more complex and more terrifying than a simple invasion. It wasn't one thing. It was everything, at once. Climate data extracted from ancient tree rings and lake sediments showed that around 1200 BCE, a severe drought hit the eastern Mediterranean, lasting decades. Harvests failed, food became scarce, civilizations that depended on surplus grain to feed their cities and armies began to buckle. At the same time, the interconnected trade networks that made the Bronze Age world function began to break down. Bronze, the metal that gave the age its name and that every weapon, tool, and piece of technology depended on, required tin and copper from distant sources. When trade routes collapsed, the supply of bronze collapsed with it. Armies couldn't be equipped, infrastructure couldn't be maintained. Then came the earthquakes. A series of massive earthquakes struck the eastern Mediterranean around this time, destroying cities and destabilizing governments already weakened by droughts and economic collapse. And then came the internal rebellions. Populations starving, governments failing, armies stretched thin. The social order that had held these civilizations together for centuries began to fracture from within. And into all of this, the Sea Peoples arrived. Not as the cause, but as the final blow. Waves of their desperate migrants and opportunistic raiders hitting civilizations that were already on their knees. A perfect storm of climate collapse, economic breakdown, natural disaster, internal rebellion, and external invasion, all hitting simultaneously, all reinforcing each other, brought down the most sophisticated world humanity had ever built. The Bronze Age collapse wasn't just the end of some ancient kingdoms. It was a reset of human civilization. Writing systems were lost. The Mycenaean writing system, Linear B, disappeared completely, and wasn't rediscovered for 3,000 years. Entire libraries of knowledge, gone. Technologies were lost. Bronze working techniques that had taken centuries to develop vanished in a generation. Architectural knowledge disappeared. Agricultural systems that had fed millions collapsed. Trade networks that had connected the known world, from Afghanistan to Egypt to Greece, took centuries to rebuild. The population of the Eastern Mediterranean may have taken 300 years to recover to its pre-collapse levels, and the civilizations that emerged from the other side, including the Greeks, whose philosophy and democracy we celebrate as the foundation of Western civilization, had no memory of what came before. They were starting over, almost from scratch, in the ruins of a world they didn't know existed. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, stories of Mycenaean heroes and Trojan wars, were not history when Homer wrote them. They were mythology, distant legends of a lost golden age that the Greeks themselves could barely remember. The Bronze Age world was so completely erased that its very existence was forgotten. The Bronze Age collapse is a reminder that civilization is not a one-way journey. It does not always move forward. It can go backward. It can collapse entirely. It can be forgotten so completely that the people living in its ruins don't even know what they lost. The drought came, the trade routes broke, the earthquake struck, the raiders arrived, and the most connected, sophisticated world humanity had ever built simply stopped. Within a generation, people who had grown up in palace cities were living in scattered villages, scratching out an existence in the ruins of a world their grandparents had built. They didn't know they were living through a collapse. They just knew that things kept getting worse. Sound familiar?